Hey folks, welcome to Hypermode Live yet again. My name's Will, and today we have Dan from Hypermode with us. Hello, Dan.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in.
Cool. Well, good to see everyone today. If you've been following our series of Hypermode Live, we've been talking about building AI agents for kind of specific personas, specific like types of workflows. The last one we did was myself and Andrew looking at agents for sales workflows. So how can you like apply like lead qualification frameworks? How can you integrate with CRMs? These sorts of things. We did one with Jessica at Hypermode, also looking at agents for marketing workflows focused around things like content generation, event follow up, and integrating with different tools in the marketing stack. Today, we are going to take a look at building agents for developer workflows. I think we're not so much going to focus on like the agentic code generation that you might see in like an IDE or some of these other code generation tools. But I think instead what we're going to take a look at are use cases for interacting, say, with databases, interacting with tools that you use as a developer every day, like GitHub, Vercel, Linear. How can I sort of help manage tickets? How can I keep internal stakeholders updated? These sorts of things. So we're going to get into that. I think maybe to kick it off, though, there's a lot of interesting like AI agent tools out there that developers are using. I think this is like a really fun time to be a developer because there's so many like AI enabled tools to help us with writing code and like what I was just talking about, like working with data and other tools. So maybe to kick off the discussion here, and let us know this in the chat too, because I'm curious to hear from everyone. But Dan, what's your sort of like go to AI tools right now for maybe let's focus on like the writing code piece. Like what are the tools you're using day to day there?
Oh, I mean, definitely in my development workflow, I'm using this tool that we spoke about, Will, called RepoMix, and I love this tool. It's like a command line tool, and you run it in a directory, and then it will spit out for you one like XML file of that whole repo, condensed into one file, and then I pretty much drag that XML file into either Claude Desktop or into ChatGPT, and it has all the context of that code base. So this is my number one development tool right now.
I used that the other day. Yeah, I dropped a link to that in the chat. I used RepoMix the other day for exactly what you described, right? Of trying to manage the like exact right sort of source code that you want to add into the context when you're working with like Claude or ChatGPT, these other tools. And I feel like that gets at like a big heart of the problem, or I'd say the challenge of working with AI agents. This idea of context engineering, right? Which is all about like how do I make sure that the right information is in the context to pass to the LLM. We can't just keep like jamming more and more information into the context there. We really need to get focused to help with things like hallucinations and having like real up to date information. Yeah, RepoMix is a good one.
RepoMix, I'm never using, to your point about context engineering, I'm never necessarily using the RepoMix output on its own either. It's maybe paired with like a bunch of images or like various supporting documents, maybe pulled from the company's Notion or something like that too. And then maybe like another section of another code base as well. Maybe if you're writing some documentation you've done repo mix in the docs directory that you're focused on. You've done a repo mix in one of the code bases that's relevant to this documentation, and then also dragging in the images and like text specs as well to really build up this context that is going to be powerful enough to get you where you need to go.
Totally. Yeah. So I'm a big Windsurf user. I'm in Windsurf most days. If you're not familiar with Windsurf, it's one of these forks of VS Code that adds kind of like agentic coding and this like ghost autocomplete LLM powered text. And I was early on with Zed, if you're familiar with the Zed text editor, and I think it was really initially its AI features were really focused on this context engineering piece, and it had sort of like the agent bar on the side that was largely about like, okay, what files do you want to include in the context? I think I'm going to revisit Zed. I saw they've released some cool new features in the last few months. But yeah, in addition to Hypermode and the Hypermode ecosystem, which we totally use, everyone in house. I'm in Windsurf a lot and Claude Code a bit for when I want sort of that like vibe coding experience. I used to be an iOS developer back in the day, and I've had a lot of fun recently getting back into iOS with Claude Code. That's a good one where, like for iOS, you're so tied to Xcode, the IDE, that you don't want to use like Windsurf, that's a fork of VS Code. You still want to use Xcode, but in the terminal have that sort of like agentic vibe coding piece. So yeah, that's a good one.
I have not played much around with Claude Code. I think this terminal piece has really put me off. But that being said, Windsurf I think is super cool for working with MCP servers. The experience there is just like the way that you can. Sorry, there's a dog that's joining me and walking all over me. The experience in Windsurf, you can connect MCP servers really easily. You can edit that JSON really easily and see the tools super quickly. And I found that, especially in developer tooling, that the MCP support is quite fragmented, and Windsurf seems to be leading the way there with what that should look like for a developer. Have you connected to many MCPs, Will?
Yeah, that's a really good point about MCP. We're gonna take a look at MCP servers today with developer tools, and I think this is really an important piece of what's driving the AI agent ecosystem right now, right? So MCP, Model Context Protocol, is a way of exposing tools to your agent, so ways for the agent to understand and act on its environment. So for example, Hypermode maintains dgraph, which is a distributed graph database. There's a dgraph MCP that exposes tools for inspecting the schema, for executing queries and mutations, and also a resource of fetching like common queries. And the coding agents, the IDEs, or like even the agentic coding tools are able to use these tools, these function calls to, say, for example, fetch the schema from your database to help you generate database queries. Or if you're doing maybe like exploratory data analysis, you want to understand what's in the database, they can actually generate and then execute a database query for you. There's MCPs for documentation, right? To pull in documentation for whatever SDKs you might be using to add that to the context. We're going to use MCPs today with Hypermode Agents to interact with different developer tools. So maybe that's a good key to dive in here. Let us know in the chat, by the way, where you're joining from. If you have any questions, if you've used Hypermode Agents, like I'd love to keep this as interactive as possible. So definitely chime in there. I see Mike's joining us today. Good to see you, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Mike and I worked together back when I mentioned my iOS days. I was working on iOS with Mike back in the day. So cool. Thanks for joining. Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll jump in to taking a hands-on look at Hypermode Agents. So here's the docs. If you've joined any of these series before, like you're probably a little bit familiar with Hypermode Agents, so I won't go through the docs here. Instead, let's just jump right in. So if you want to follow along, the best place to start is just hypermode.com slash login. Drop a link to that in the chat. And when you sign in, you'll be prompted to create a workspace, and then you'll see this screen. And this is Hypermode Agents. This is sort of the thread view where we can create threads or conversations with our agents. So Hypermode Agents is all about creating domain-specific agents through natural language. So what that means is that I don't have like one single agent that I'm interacting with. I want to be able to like give a background, a role, context, capabilities, like very specific in a specific domain to my agent. I want to be able to describe that in natural language, and then through connections powered by MCP servers, I want to be able to empower my agent to understand and act on this in its environment on my behalf, right? So when I authorize a tool, so for example, we're going to add the GitHub connection shortly. When I do that, any interactions that the agent takes are going to be on my behalf.
So it's almost like you've got an army of teammates, and they've got all their specialist access to the tools that they need.
Yeah, I think of it as like my fleet of interns, essentially,
Like
right?
Yeah.
I think agents are kind of like at the capability now where they're able to like take instructions and get things done, but they may need a little more hand holding than just like an autonomous employee that is experienced in a certain area, whereas like an intern maybe needs a little more check in. There's still that like human in the loop component. So that's how I think about it.
I guess with this, we've got this conversational piece as well. So you say about an intern, but I think once we're going to see in this live stream that we're going to add connections and we're going to refine our agent system prompt. And so you can eventually turn your Hypermode agent into like a sophisticated teammate. But you'll see through this intelligence gathering interface that we're going to be refining the agent to become something that's really powerful.
Totally. Having successful sort of tasks executed by your agent, I think requires a bit of iteration for sure. And that there are a few ways to do that. Either, in sort of the agent system prompt, the user message, the way that we interact with the agent, the way that we configure tools, the model we select, right? And I think all of this falls back into this discussion of context engineering. Cool. Well, let's see what we can do here. So when you first sign in to Hypermode and Hypermode Agents, there's a single agent called Sidekick that we can see here. So if I go to the Agents tab, I can see here, this is Sidekick. Sidekick is my personal assistant. And if I go in the thread view here, I can create a new thread with Sidekick, which is right here, is sort of the default view. Sidekick has access to my Google Calendar. That's kind of its initially its only connection here. The first time you sign in, if you haven't already added Google Calendar, there's like an Add Connections button here, or in the thread view, there's kind of a button prompting you to configure the connection, and you'll go through the OAuth flow to give access to Google Calendar for the Sidekick agent. I lost my screen there in the screen share. I'm gonna
Sidekick's super handy because it can sit on your desk with you, and as Will mentioned, you have this Google Calendar integration, and most of us are scheduling meetings all the time, and so you can start asking Sidekick, what's in your calendar, as Will's typing up there, and it's going to reach out into the tool call, which is powered by MCP, and then fulfill that data through Google Calendar. So you can see there that Google Calendar is listing the events, and then the agent is smart enough to summarize them for us.
Totally. And so I asked, like, where am I traveling over the next 2 weeks? And if we look at the detail of the tool call to the calendar, so that's the Google Calendar connection, which is really authorizing the MCP server to interact with Google Calendar on my behalf. There's a list of tools, like functionality that's added to our agent. And so our agent, when we send it a user message, when we send it a question, like, where am I traveling over the next 2 weeks? It's going to decide, like, well, what tools do I have that could possibly answer this? And so it's calling the list events tool and passing in parameters for the date range over the next 2 weeks. And it gets back a bunch of information. I have like reminders to take out the trash and other meetings and things like this. But our agent is smart enough to filter out, well, he asked about travel, like what are specifically things related to travel. So I'm going to Seattle. We've got an event in Seattle. I'm coming back to San Francisco and then flying to Austin. And we can dig in further. So I can say, like, why am I traveling to Seattle? And in this case, the agent didn't need to go back to Google Calendar to call another tool. Like it has the result of this tool call in the context and agent memory, like from the conversation. It's like, well, you're going to Seattle to host and attend this AI Hack and Quack event that Hypermode is partnering with on MotherDuck. It's a good opportunity for me to hype this event, perhaps, which we are indeed hosting next week with our friends at MotherDuck. So I'm gonna copy this link and share this in the chat. If you're in the Seattle area, I hope you will join us. This should be a fun one. We're going to do a hands-on workshop with Hypermode and MotherDuck together, and then do some presentations, and should be a fun night. So this is part of Seattle Tech Week.
Is that the winners get a free rubber duck as well of the hackathon at the end there?
Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. If you come, you might get a free rubber duck.
MotherDuck has some of the best branding and swag. Like, look how fun. Where did it go? Here it is. Like look at this super fun like banner that they put together, right? Like
I love the Hypermode sticker on the laptop too. It's,
Totally. I love the MotherDuck brand. Super fun. All their events are super fun too. Cool. So if you're in Seattle, hope to see you there. It's part of Seattle Tech Week. There's a lot going on in Seattle that week. Cool. So let's have a look here. So, and I can continue to interact with the agent to help me like plan events. A common use case here is like to do research, like who am I meeting with, but I can also say, I don't know, maybe like find a restaurant near the Hack and Quack event for dinner afterwards. Right. And in this case, our model is going to use a web search tool. So in addition to like the Google Calendar connection, there's also web search tools that are sort of built in by default. Here's a bunch of options that are nearby, like in this neighborhood. And it's asking me, do I want a reservation? Yes, let's do Brunello Ristorante. How many do we have in our party? Let's say 2 in the party. Hack and Quack ends at 10. That's a little late. Let's do 8 p.m. And like, it's like, hey, this is a very good personal assistant, right? It's like, hey, you've got an event that ends at 10 and you're telling me you want to schedule dinner at 8. Like, let's confirm this. Like, yes, let's do
Just a screen
8 p.m. Yeah, sorry about that. We've got a little bit of technical difficulties. This happened previously, where my screen kept dropping. Last time there was some issue with my sound. Hopefully the mic sounds good. Cool. So yeah, I want a reservation. Like, yes, book the reservation by email. And anyway, I can keep going on this down this thread, and I could give the agent access to Gmail to like send the reservation request on my behalf, and progress down that road. But we're not building restaurant booking agents today. We're building agents for developers. I see a question from Raymond here asking how to reconnect the calendar if you didn't check the boxes. Yeah, so this is a good point. So when you go through that OAuth flow, and we'll see one of these in a minute. I had already connected my calendar, and so this was already done. But you need to like authorize the calendar and like various permissions, right? So I want to say like, yes, you can read events, you can see my contacts, you can create events, like yes or no. And oftentimes you might want to like change things to, well, I actually want to give you like a different permission, like that sort of thing. And exactly like what Raymond says here is that's exactly right. Is you go to the workspace settings, to connections, and then here's all the connections I've added so far and for the whole workspace. And then if I go to here to update connection, this will go through the OAuth flow again, so I can change like various permissions for our connection to Google Calendar or to any of these really. They have different authorization methods.
Most of them are quite, self walkthrough as well. So once you actually click that connection button, you're going to be taken straight to that external service, and it's kind of a click flow, and then you should be integrated. I saw that a friend of mine, Wayu, has joined the chat, so welcome, and look forward to sharing more about Hypermode Agents with you.
Cool. Hello. Thanks for joining. Cool. Well, let's stop our dinner reservation process and let's do something developer focused, since that's what we're here for. So the first thing we need to do is create a new agent, right? So we have by default in the free tier, we have access to this Sidekick agent, but we want to be able to create our own domain specific agents that understand how to work with developer tools. And we also want to be able to add more connections. To do this, we need to upgrade to Hypermode Pro, which is currently in beta. So upgrading is free. We're giving folks at least 1 month of Hypermode Pro to really get a lot of feedback from the community, which is super useful. You can do this either by scheduling like a super quick 15-minute onboarding call. We do this because we want to just understand what you're building and kind of set expectations and as I say, get feedback. Or for folks following along now, I have a secret unlock code, which is, I think, if I can remember, HYP-live-developers. I'll drop that in the chat. Let's see if that's the right code. Cool. Yeah, that worked for me. So I got this pop-up that says you've upgraded to Pro. And the first thing I notice is now I have a new agent in my list of agents, which is Hypermode Concierge and Agent Builder, which is what we're going to use to create a new agent. So I can go back to the thread view here. This is where I have kind of all of my threads across all of my agents, which is kind of I think of as like my mission control sort of. But I'm going to go to create new, and I'm going to create a new thread with the Hypermode concierge. So concierge is, like I said, I think of it as like an agent to help me build an agent, which is a bit meta, but I think this gets at like one of the value propositions of Hypermode agents is being able to create these domain specific agents using natural language. And so what this boils down to is like a complex and well structured system prompt for the agent. And that can be kind of like a
Lost your screen, Will.
little bit of a pain to write manually, and so concierge is really meant to help us with that process. And so we go through this kind of interactive chat with concierge, which will then write the well-structured system prompt for our agent. So the first example we want to show, we were talking earlier about rather than just focus on like writing code for developers, let's look at some of the tools kind of in the developer ecosystem that we're typically working with, like databases, GitHub, deployment services. So I really like the Neo4j Graph database. So let's create a agent that is capable of building knowledge graphs. So I'm going to say I want to create an agent that is a graph database expert who can use Neo4j to create and query knowledge graphs.
Will's a super fast typer, as we can all see.
Was that fast? I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty fast. It's not well.
Here's a fun fact. My dad, years ago, and I hope he's not listening, got fired from a job because he could not type 40 words per minute. He had much coaching and much testing, and he was unable to do it, and so they fired him.
I think there's some like online leaderboards or websites you can like play a game and spit the words out really quickly. So it looks like Will's going through this intelligence gathering process. We've given it the task that we want to connect to Neo4j, the database, and we want to issue some queries. And Concierge is intelligent enough to ask you the right questions to ultimately build an agent for you that's reusable, living and breathing. And that's powered under the hood by this system prompt. And you can see that the system prompt has just actually been spat out to us with the identity and the context, and we're giving it all the information we need till finally, what is the name of our agent? Graph Guru is going to be accessible to us to ask questions and interact with, all via this agent-generated system prompt. Looks like it's been created for you there, Will.
And we can see here that like concierge is just another agent that has tools. And so we've given it this Hypermode create agent tool. And so once concierge is done kind of interviewing me to understand the agent I want to create, the type of connections that I want to build, once it's written that system prompt, it calls this Hypermode create agent tool. And I'll see that agent in the agent view here, or in the thread view. I can create a new chat with this agent. Let's take a look in the agent view, because there's some interesting things here. So one thing to note is we can change the avatar here. I'm gonna change to this guy. And we can see here like the instructions. We can edit these. We mentioned earlier there's this like iterative process based on like our interactions. And I was gonna show this live, but maybe we'll just make some edits here. So based on like my experiments with this, I know that one thing that makes our like database agents a little slower is when they try to do single operations. So I'm going to ask it in a minute to create a knowledge graph from unstructured text, and I don't want it to like make a like request to the database to add a single node and a single transaction, and then another transaction to add another node, and then another to add a relationship. I want it to do it in batch. And so this is just something that I learned, and we could come back and add this later, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to add this now. So I'm going to create a new, like, I don't know, capabilities section that sort of says, when, or maybe a better way, maybe a better thing is to call this like the constraints. So when creating the knowledge graph, be sure to use batch operations rather than creating, I don't know, a single node in a single transaction. So this is really just a speed thing. I don't want to have to wait for it to send a bunch of transactions. I wanted to do like a whole bunch all at once. The other interesting thing here is we can choose different models. This is powered by Hypermode's model router functionality. So behind the scenes, we're using the same API to sort of proxy different models. GPT-4.1 is kind of the default, but we can choose other models depending on what we're trying to do. If we want our agent to be really efficient and fast, GPT-4.1 Mini is a good case. That's going to use like a lot less tokens. Because we're working with database tool, we're going to be generating database queries. I found that like Claude Sonnet 4 is really good at that. So we're going to select Claude Sonnet 4 and make those changes. And then we can create a new thread here with our agent, or we can jump back to the thread view and create a new thread with Graph Guru. Before I do that, though, I realize there's one thing we forgot to do, which is to add our connection to Neo4j. So let's go to connections. And before I add a connection, I need to create a Neo4j instance. We're going to do this using Neo4j sandbox. I don't need to copy all of that stuff, but let me grab just this part of the link. We'll drop that in the chat. So sandbox.neo4j.com. I'm curious, has anyone used Neo4j before, or familiar with Neo4j, or even better, have you used Neo4j Sandbox before? Let us know. I'm not going to say too much about Neo4j in the interest of time here, but really it's a graph database that allows us to model, store, query data as a graph of connected nodes and relationships. We're going to choose the blank sandbox. This is going to create a Neo4j instance like hosted privately for us, so that we have access to this. So if you want to follow along, like, feel free to.
We have one person who's used Neo4j, Raymond.
Raymond says yes. Cool. What did you use Neo4j for? What was it related to knowledge graphs, or are you using it currently? I'm really curious to know what folks are using graphs for.
There's a little gotcha that we have here, right? And this connection setup will.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to connect to Neo4j, right? So we have like the IP address, the HTTP port, the Bolt port. Bolt is this binary protocol that Neo4j uses. There's a WebSocket Bolt port. Like that's a lot of fun. Let's take a look at our excellent documentation that Dan wrote on connecting Neo4j. So in the docs, there's a connection tab here that shows like different connections that we have. This is just highlighting a few. There's like 2,000 different connections, but we're starting to add more detailed connection guides, because there are a few gotchas here, as Dan says, for how you connect to things like databases. How do you add the correct token? These sorts of things. So I'll drop a link to the docs there. Basically, what we need to do, if we go back to connections here in our agent view, let's add a connection. We want to add the Neo4j connection. This is going to help us set up the Neo4j MCP server. I had already added it, so I need actually to go back to my workspace settings, to connections, and go to that update connection. This is what what I think was it Raymond was asking earlier, like how do we update the connection if we've already gone through the auth flow? And this is going to allow me to replace the connection that I had earlier. So the username is always going to be Neo4j. Let's go back to Sandbox. Let's grab the password. Here's the password for my Sandbox instance. And then the query API URL. Now this is going to be the URL for the Neo4j's query API, and specifically version 2. This is like the version 2 of their HTTP API, which isn't displayed completely here, but it's pretty close. So instead of the transactional cipher endpoint, it's going to be /db/neo4j/query/v2. I think that's right. And this is documented in that doc that I just shared a link to. Okay, cool. So we've successfully added our Neo4j connection. I can go back to my new thread with our graph guru here, and let's see, a few folks.
Quite a few people use Neo4j, it looks like. So we've got the great audience for it.
Yeah. So Sabbatical says, haven't used it, but heard about it. Cool. Yeah. I think Neo4j has done a lot of interesting things talking about the relevance of knowledge graphs for AI, and specifically GraphRag, which kind of Raymond is hitting at here, right? Knowledge graphs for hybrid RAG. So RAG is where you have this retrieval step, to, again, going back to this idea of context engineering, where depending on the user message, depending on the system prompt, like going to a database and finding the most like relevant information to inject into the context. Krishma says knowledge graphs or app-specific data. Cool. Yeah. So cool. Good to hear that folks are using graphs with AI. That's great to hear. So let's create a knowledge graph from unstructured data. I'm a big fan of Hacker News. If you're familiar, this is like a news aggregation site, very active, like community of tech-related things. It's really interesting to analyze like what are the popular topics and these sorts of things. And so I'm going to say I want to create a knowledge graph of the Hacker News front page. Cool. And so the first thing we're going to do is use a web crawling tool to get some information on what's on the front page of Hacker News. So get their articles, get their information. And then once we've done that, we're going to build this graph up in Neo4j.
What's interesting is that we didn't necessarily tell it to use the web tool, the web connection, but that is built into every single agent, if I'm not mistaken. Well,
totally. Yeah. There's so the only like explicit connection that we've added here so far is the Neo4j connection, but there are a bunch of like built-in tools in the Hypermode Agents platform, like web search, web crawling, Ref, I think, is built in, which provides documentation of different services, that sort of thing. Now, going back to what we were talking about earlier of this like iterative process where we might go back and tune the system prompt, we might tune like our user message, the way we interact with the agent. Like, notice here that I said, hey, I want to create a knowledge graph, and our agent's like, cool, we're going to do that. Like, let's scrape the data. Now let me start sending some queries. And notice here that it's like tried to do things in batch. So did this query time out? Yeah. So this query timed out, I guess, because it probably just sent everything all at once. And once I get my screen back here, like it's smart enough to know, oh, okay, well that was too big a batch. Let me try a smaller batch. And so this is good, but like one thing that I don't like here is that it didn't ask me what graph schema I wanted to use. It's just like, cool, I scraped the data. Now let's start writing to the graph. And so this is where I might go back to the system prompt and I might tune that a little bit to say, hey, always ask the user, like, what do they want to focus on? What is the graph model they want to use? Like, maybe I care about the topics, maybe I care about the comments, maybe I want to like crawl and scrape all of the comments and the users and then analyze that somehow. So we could go back and update the agent prompt that way, right? So I could go back to my agent view, graph guru, and then I would probably add that here like in constraints and say something like before creating the knowledge graph, always verify with the user the graph model they want to use and what data to include, right? So I'd add that to this constraint section, give that a save, and then maybe go back to my thread or try a new thread. This is kind of still going on in smaller batches. Let's just jump into Neo4j really quick. We'll take a look at the browser and just see like what data did it actually create. So I'm going to open Neo4j browser, which is like Neo4j's query workbench for inspecting the graph. I think I need to go through the sign-in flow. Cool, that's good. And so the first thing we can do here, if I remember, oh, I did, didn't I? I don't know why. I always seem to have a little issue with the streaming.
I think this piece of like editing the system prompt, I think is really important as well. Refining what works and what doesn't, and then kind of editing that. So your next process of whatever you're doing is going to be more efficient. Oh, and it looks like we got some nodes in there, which is cool.
Yeah, so we've got like some article nodes, and then platform nodes, and so I think our agent is going through and like adding nodes, and then it'll go back and add relationships. But really, I wanted to tune that graph model a bit because I wanted to like extract the topics, because that's really what I'm interested in. Like what are the most common topics across all of these? What users are posting about them? And then I could go maybe to another tool and enrich the graph. Maybe I want to understand like who of the people that are posting, like what companies do they work for, and this sort of thing. So I might like enrich that with like LinkedIn. Dan's putting together like a cool workshop showing how to do something like that with, is it Product Hunt and LinkedIn search to build the graph?
LinkedIn, web search. I think that's the real power of Hypermode Agents in that, we have 2,000 plus connections. So rarely are you just using one of these connections in isolation. If we think about like building knowledge graphs, well, this content comes from so many different places. So like you said, Will, we could add in LinkedIn here, and then for each person that is found, we can reach out to the LinkedIn API and find some more information about who they are, what company do they work for, and so on and so forth.
Totally. So if we wanted
go ahead, Will.
So if we wanted to do that, I would like go in and add another connection and, add like the LinkedIn connection to give it access LinkedIn on my behalf. And then I might modify the prompt a bit here to say like, oh, and you also have access to LinkedIn using your tools. The agent is aware of this, but it can always help to be a little more explicit there.
looks like we got Neo4j connected to our agent quite successfully.
Cool. Yeah. So we can work with database tools. That's probably enough for me. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen before it drops again. Mike mentioned there's also Falcor DB, which spun out from Redis Graph for GraphRag. Yeah, what's interesting to me is like there are quite a few graph databases that support Cypher or GQL now that has become kind of the a standard query language. And so it's interesting to see lots of interesting tooling around the databases enabled by having a common graph database language, just the way that like SQL enables lots of interesting tools for relational databases. Yeah, cool. Good point. So what Dan is going to show now is a different way of creating an agent. And so I went through the Hypermode concierge sort of like back and forth interview process to create an agent. You can also manually create an agent by manually defining the like role and background for the agent by defining the agent system prompt, which is what Dan's doing now. And it looks like we're going to be adding a GitHub agent who is capable of also looking at document changes in Notion. Dan, I think you might be muted.
Famous last words. Okay. This, yeah, as we mentioned, this is another way of building an agent. It's a little bit easier if you want to get started quickly, although we do recommend you going through the concierge, as you know, it's this intelligent agent that allows you to build agents, and it's going to ask you all the relevant questions that it might need. But for the sake of this demonstration, we can put something together really quickly, and then we can refine those instructions later on. So what I want this agent to do, every day I go to the Hypermode docs repo, and I just check the latest PRs that have been merged and have been opened to stay up to date. And I want this agent to take those issues and PRs and put them into Notion for us. And so we have both the GitHub and Notion connection. So I'm just going to go to my agent and just double check that it is connected, and it isn't. So let's go through the flow of adding GitHub. And it's automatically added because what I've done in the background on the workspace level is I've already configured GitHub and Notion. And so that was kind of touching on what we were saying earlier and how you can have different permissions for the workspace level or the agent level, depending on who's in your team and what the agent has access to. So great, my GitHub agent has been connected to GitHub and Notion, and it has a very small prompt, but actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it the Hypermode docs repo and put that in there as well. Here is the zoomed in. There we go. Okay, great. So can you find me the latest PRs and issues? And so because we've connected Notion and GitHub, it has the list of all of those tools, and highly encourage you to check out our docs to figure out what other tools they have available. But straight away, it was able to pull the latest pull requests from GitHub and the latest issues. And so here are the tool call cards. So do keep a lookout for these tool call cards, as sometimes it can be the data can be enriched with a web search or sometimes even hallucination. So it's great to see these. It knows that we know we're connected. And then a bunch of PRs and issues. So we're doing some stuff with Attio, some knowledge graph extraction, which Will mentioned. And the one that I specifically am looking for is the Neo4j one, but I don't think it's in there. But maybe some, or is this the open? Oh, let's see if we can you get the closed?
I see one of those open pull requests is the tutorial we were just talking about, which is the knowledge graph extraction.
This one right here, right? So this will be up in a few days, but for the keen eye, you can start looking through. And it looks like it also got the closed. And here's the Neo4j guide as well. Great. So what I want to do now is I want to pull all of this information into Notion, so I can share this with the rest of the team in a more concise way. So let's ask it if it can you make a new document in Notion? And so sometimes the Notion connection, it may prompt you to provide a pre-existing document. In this case, it's just ask us for a title. So we can just call it, give it today's date and a small description. So the agent also understands what today is as well. We've injected that into the runtime, and so it should be intelligent enough now to pull that, give a description of what's happening in the documentation repo, and then give us a Notion document that we can share with the team. I did also want to connect Linear in this. If you don't know what Linear is, it's a project management tool, but I don't know if we have enough time. We have a little bit of an issue with Notion. It looks like I need the correct Notion workspace parent page or database to create a document. So what I'll do instead is I'll make a new one. So let's just call it today's date, which is the 24th of the 7th, 2025, GitHub, docs. And let's see if it can use this link now. And so once we've refined this flow as well of getting the pull requests into the Notion document, we can then edit that system prompt again to be more precise with what happens. Okay, so it looks like it added the stuff in, and a bunch of JSON has gone in there, which is great. So let's go to this doc now. This document was created. It looks like the issues and PRs haven't actually been put in there. So let's ask it once more. Can you put the issues in the doc? Let's see if it can pull those issues and update that doc.
And notice here, like initially there was some issue with the agent, like understanding exactly what page to use. One trick I like to use is just limiting the pages that I give access, that I grant access to when you go through the OAuth flow. Oftentimes, I just want like a specific section or a specific workspace in Notion for the agent to work with. And so then it often find better results that way if the agent sort of has more narrow focus on like, okay, I'm like just working with this page. That can be a way to get around that too. But looks like the agent did update the document.
Yeah. And so I know we're a bit pressed for time here, but the next goal would be to take this and to make tasks, maybe to review these open PRs in Linear. And then you can start to use this GitHub agent in your day-to-day development workflow to enhance visibility of what's going on across all of your development domain, not just scope to GitHub. I know we're close to time, so I'll probably stop share screen there, and we can move forward with the rest of the stream.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good look at how we can use some developer tools that we're using typically in our day to day as a developer, working with tools like GitHub, Notion. We looked at working with databases as well. So that's really cool. We are about out of time, but if anyone has any questions, drop them in the chat, and we'll try to get to those. As we end here, I want to mention a couple resources. I'll drop this in the chat. We are running a agent bootcamp right now, so sort of 30 days hands-on with Hypermode agents. We are where are we now? We're just getting ready to launch week 4. I have that mostly written. You look at the whiteboard behind me, you can see kind of what the plan is going forward. But there's still plenty of time to catch up. In week 3, we're talking about kind of domain-specific agents. So I think if you watch today's live stream, you're kind of caught up with weeks 1 and 2 and can jump right into to week 3. Week 4 is going to be all about context engineering. So we're going to take a look at the components that go into that, which is kind of like what are best practices around prompt engineering, both for the system prompt and our user messages. How do we do retrieval with different database tools? And then we also are going to introduce dgraph graph database as well, which is, as I mentioned earlier, that's a graph database that Hypermode builds and maintains for working with large-scale knowledge graphs. We're also doing, regular events like this live stream, and we're also doing these regular check-ins for the Hypermode agent bootcamp. Our next one looks like 8 a.m. Pacific tomorrow. We're going to dive into reviewing the context engineering piece here. And we're doing lots of other events like in San Francisco online. We're doing one next week with Stripe on the Stripe developer channel. And I mentioned that event that we're doing with Mother Duck in Seattle as part of Seattle Tech Week. So definitely be sure to follow us on the Luma calendar. You can also jump into the Hypermode Discord, which is, I'll drop a link to that in the chat as well if you want to get in contact with us or chat some more about cool things with AI agents.
See you on Discord, everybody.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. We're right at the top of the hour, so I think we will leave it there. But yeah, join us on Discord. Check out another one of our live streams. And really, at this stage, really appreciate any feedback that folks have as they're going through Hypermode agents and sort of building with AI. Let us know, like, are there connections you'd like to see? What sort of use cases do you have in mind? This sort of thing is super helpful for us right now. Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and we will see you all next time. Cheers.